Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View today. Before we get to the meat of our program, which includes some very interesting and informative guests, I just want to announce to you, in case you haven't heard it, that a great American died today. His name is Truett Cathy. He was the founder of Chick-fil-A, which, of course, all of you probably know that it's a quick-service chicken restaurant. And he was just a great American. He was really a hard worker. He ended up with more than 1,800 locations for the Chick-fil-A restaurants in 39 states and Washington, D.C., $5 billion in annual sales. And who doesn't love Chick-fil-A? But certainly his life was an example of an entrepreneur, a person who practiced free market values and also charitable living. Heritage Foundation said today, Cathy knew the pathway to success began by looking outside of himself to the interests of others. Sounds very biblical to me. And he certainly understood that for entrepreneurs to profit, they must create value for others. He created that value and rewards followed, says Heritage Foundation. He famously closed all of his stores on Sundays so employees could attend church and be with their families. And he created the WinShape Foundation in the early 80s. The stated goal was to shape winners by helping young people succeed in life through scholarships and other programs. He was famously supportive of marriage and certainly the subject of controversy because of that support of marriage. And I think it made Chick-fil-A even much more beloved in the hearts of believers and conservative Americans across the country. So a great man died today at 93, Truett Cathy. Well, we're going to talk about something that's very interesting to families today here on Point of View, and that's the subject of education. It's probably the subject that the founder of Point of View, Marlon Maddox, talked about more than any other subject during his 3 decades hosting this program. And we're going to come back to it. It's sometimes you can just say it's the same old thing recycled, but there's always a new wrinkle to it, and that's Common Core. And we've got a couple of great guests to talk about it today. One is David Barton, and he's with Wall Builders, and a historian. I don't think anybody listening doesn't know about David Barton. And also Sarah Perry will join me later. She's with the Family Research Council, and she's heading up their Common Core initiative. And then later in the program, we're going to switch gears and talk about an amendment that's being proposed in the United States Senate to repeal part of the First Amendment. It has to do with political speech, of course, conservative speech. But first, let's go to this issue of Common Core. And my first guest is David Barton, founder and president of Wall Builders, and certainly an historian and also an activist in conservative causes. And David, thank you so much for being with me.
My pleasure, Penna. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you, and I don't think that you'll disagree with the statement I made earlier that part of this whole idea of Common Core is sort of this recycled idea we've been actually battling in the conservative movement for decades. That's sort of a national control of what our students learn in the classroom, correct?
Yeah, it's two elements going at the same time. It goes all the way back to Genesis, but one is the worldview you want your kids raised with, and the second is who owns the kids. And so this is installment number 487 over the last 6,000 years of we own the kids, and here's what we want them to learn, as opposed to parents own the kids, and here's what parents want them to learn. So this is a new version of the educrats. It's a new version. And the higher the educrats go, the worse it is for parents, by the way. So we're talking educrats in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's bad enough when you have educrats at the state level or educrats at the local level, But when you get to educrats, and I'm not talking educators, I'm talking educrats, at the federal level, that's where it gets stinky, and that's where this is.
Well, you make a wonderful distinction here, David, because, sometimes when we talk about education, we rattle cages. We have certainly lots of teachers listening. We have lots of people who love their teachers, of their students. And we all, as parents, need to support our teachers. But, it's become, in many institutions, especially colleges, but even down to the local level, that there are so many bureaucrats in the educational establishment. You wonder what all these people do. First of all, why aren't they spending the money on the teachers in the classroom?
One of the interesting bills that will stick with me for however long, because it's indicative of how bad the bureaucratic system is, or the educrats, is when we in Texas tried to pass a bill that stipulated 65 cents out of every education dollar is to be spent in the classroom. And it sounded good. Everybody's for more money for the kids, less on the system. And we got the bill killed because it turned out that in San Antonio and Dallas and Houston and El Paso and Fort Worth and bigger districts, that the ratio of teachers to bureaucrats was 1-to-1. So you couldn't spend 65 cents in the classroom because 50 cents is dedicated to, quote, administration. And so one administrator for every teacher? You got to be kidding. And that's the bureaucracy of the educational system. I've been more and more intrigued with, man, look at what we did with one-room schoolhouses and how smart those kids were. If you doubt that, go online and take the exit exams for 8th grade, because until about 1920, nobody graduated past 8th grade. I mean, 8th grade is as high as you went. Take an exit exam for Oklahoma in 1920 or Colorado in 1925 or Nebraska in 1917. Take the 8th grade exit exam, and it's postdoctoral stuff today. And we were getting that out of one-room classrooms where the teacher was teaching English to a 3rd grader and an 8th grader at the same time, teaching math, calculus level, and introductory multiplication tables at the same time. I mean, look how well it worked, and look where we are now, that we got a 1-to-1 ratio. And America has fallen from number 1 in literacy to number 68 in literacy in the world. I don't think it's working the way it's supposed to.
David Barton is my guest, and he heads up Wall Builders. David, do you have that exit exam on your Wall Builders website?
We do. We have some. We have a Chicago one from 1862. We've got the Colorado ones, and they're embarrassing to take. And I say that because I was a principal of the school, and there's a ton of that stuff I can't pass. And this is 8th grade. Every 8th grader in America knew this stuff, and look at how far we've fallen. It's really sad.
Folks, you can get to Wall Builders' website by going to pointofview.net. Under the web links, it's the very first web link. And if you want to take that test, it might be an interesting exercise. And also, while you're on the website, I put an article up. I don't know if you saw this, David, but it was from the Wall Street Journal, and it was a math teacher out in California who was appalled at the standards for math under Common Core. And that's just one area. But you, didn't you major in math or teach math at one time?
I did. And one of the interesting things about Common Core is it has been touted as being internationally normed, and it's been touted as being the next level of rigor, et cetera. And you'll find the opposition to Common Core in so many communities is being led by the teachers who actually teach the subjects. The lit teachers, the English teachers, the reading teachers, the math teachers, these guys are up in arms because they don't like how low we've already sunk, and this takes them even lower. And to take the math standards, take trig. Here, we want to really teach good stuff to the kids in math. So the system we're introducing that is internationally normed was definitely internationally normed. It was used in Russia until they rejected it for complete failure. But now we picked it up. It'll work for us. I mean, Russians don't have a clue in math, but we've got it. And now what we're introducing in reading is the identical stuff that even California rejected 30 years ago as being an abysmal failure, but now we have a new generation of educrats who don't know what California did 40 years ago, 30 years ago when they rejected whole language reading, et cetera. And so, I mean, our international stuff that they keep talking about, it's internationally normed, internationally rejected, but we're trying to make it work here.
I'm going to ask you why right after the break. David Barton is with me. We're going to talk about Common Core a lot more right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
It may begin with teasing or even insults, but it doesn't stop there. Bullying has become a major issue for parents, teachers, and schools to address. More than 1 in 5 school children report being bullied on a regular basis. Bullying doesn't stop when students graduate. Bosses and spouses bully others. There is really only one way to stop the bullying syndrome: intervention. June Hunt explains what this is and how to stop it in her newest book, Bullying, Bully No More. On my program and in her book, she explained the important differences between common conflict and bullying. She also reminds us that nearly all bullies are bullied themselves. That starts a progression that parents and teachers need to observe and interrupt. She also talks about the important role a bystander can have in stopping a bully. Usually there's a bully, a victim, and a number of bystanders. Those who stand by and watch it happen usually are encouraging bullies to do even more. Bullies usually believe their behavior is justified. They even feel entitled. They think it is okay to say mean things. After all, someone did it to them. They have to be the center of attention, and that is why bystanders need to intervene and stop providing the bully with a ready audience. June Hunt also takes on 10 of the most popular fallacies of bullying. Some believe that bullying is normal and merely a rite of passage. Others believe that bullying is a rare occurrence. Even others believe that bullies will mature and grow out of bullying behavior. All of these ideas and many others discussed in the book are false. The Bible reminds bullies that God opposes the proud. Bystanders should remember that Proverbs says that we should rescue those being led away to death. I applaud June Hunt for writing a book that pastors, parents, and teachers need. Bullying is a real problem, and her book provides a biblical perspective and practical answers. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
My guest is David Barton, founder and president of Wall Builders. My name is Penna Dexter, and we're talking about public education. David is outlining the Common Core curriculum that the states have adopted, most of them, not all. And of course, David, this started with this race to the top funding where states could compete for funds. And then a lot of states signed on to Common Core, sight unseen. A lot of people in our own conservative movement supported it. But like any of these big government programs, sometimes you have to start implementing it to find out what's in it. And we are, and it's less popular now. Why? You mentioned before the break the low standards, adopting standards that failed in Russia, in California. Why do we do that? Why do we adopt low standards or mediocre standards from the federal level that make learning actually harder?
Because we're in a climate that says we're experts, and if we're experts, we know what we're talking about. You can trust us on this. And so we hire experts to do things, but they're grounded usually in their own beliefs and concepts, not in what's actually worked and hasn't worked. And that's where you're getting a lot of these folks that are stepping in and saying, whoa, what you're doing here is exactly what Russia did, and they rejected it. Yeah, well, they didn't do it our way. And so what you have is folks who have been through this before that have this, as opposed to new, bright, young people who say, man, I know this is what my professor told me we could do. And that, by the way, is the disturbing thing about so many textbooks. You'll find that most of these major national textbook publishers, while they have a very reputable name on top as the editor, it is usually graduate students who end up writing the textbooks, not the historians. And so most work done on educational things and educational curriculum and writing is done by the hired underlings that have not near the knowledge that others who have been through the industry have. So that's part of the difficulty. The other part is coming out as you look, for example, in my cases, I've been appointed in a lot of states to do the social studies standards in those states. And what you always look for is tone. You want tone out of there. You want to show the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so, for example, if you're going to cover McCarthy and talk about all the bad things McCarthy did in McCarthyism, that's fine, but you also have to cover the Venona papers to show that, according to Russian documents, there actually were spies in Hollywood, and there were Russian spies in the media and industry. And so you take the tone out of it by showing both sides. This is not what happens in Common Core. You get a steady dose of indoctrination of one viewpoint, and they're not very conscious of who objects. And so that's another indication that this is a philosophical approach rather than an academic approach. And that's usually what comes from bureaucrats, is the philosophical rather than the academic approaches.
David, what do you know about, because we've been hearing a lot of news about the rewriting of U.S. history, and this is for the standards for people taking the College Board tests, so you have to teach this. What do you know about it?
They're really abominable. We have, and see, this is where Texas becomes so big in this, because there's 460,000 students in the college in the AP courses for high schools. Your brightest kids, these are where your leader's going to come from, and 45,000 of those kids are in Texas. And so what Texas is about to vote on is whether or not to even participate in this AP test. Because right now, the AP test has been done before, allowed states to have their own standards. And so you ask general questions about the Civil War, about the Revolution, whatever, and the states taught according to what was important to the parents and teachers in those states. Now they've come out with a 95-page criterion that says, all right, here's what you must know for the AP. So now the test is driving the content. And you find that none of the Founding Fathers are mentioned in the test at all, except one acknowledgement of Washington's second inaugural address. That's the only Founding Father mentioned. Nothing in the American Revolution. The Civil War is gone. Military generals are gone. Patton Eisenhower, forget about it. The Martin Luther King Jr., why would we cover him in history? And you take all these notable figures, they are gone, and what is inserted instead is every negative thing that you can think of that ever happened in history, which should be covered, but it should be the good, the bad, the ugly. So what they cover is the bad and the ugly, not the good, and they take out anything that makes America look positive. So now, if you go through the AP course and you're taught according to the 95 pages, you will not learn about the American founding. You will not learn the Constitution. You will not learn about the Civil Rights Movement. You will learn about slavery, however. You will not have World War II heroes, but you will learn about that we bombed Japan with atomic weapons, and that raised all sorts of world questions about America's values. I mean, that's what's in the test. And so now they have been put so on the defensive by teachers who are not in any way associated with the radical religious right or any conservative. Even teachers from the other side are saying, this is abominable. You can't just teach one side and teach a negative tone. So we actually know a good bit about that, but a real key thing is happening in Texas, because if Texas says no to that test, and by the way, we got word from our attorneys that even in Texas, where we have our own standards, what we call our TEKS, that students, that teachers will not be able to teach the TEKS, which is state required for these kids. They can only teach this new test. So now we have this new test trumping local education in Texas, trumping what our elected representatives, we work so hard to get through them. And now we've got educrats that have trumped our own system here. So if Texas says no, that's 10% of these kids that won't take the test, which means that they won't get paid for taking the test, which means it'll probably put the AP people out of business if they lose 10% of the market. So
wow.
That is a hope that we can get it stopped here.
Well, AP is, I mean, when you talk about money in AP testing saves parents money, because if their kids can pass the test with a certain score, they can actually get college credit, or they can go in with hours. And so it's definitely, there's a financial component to this, David.
And, you know, one of the interesting things right now, and one of the programs that we promote through Wall Builders, is a college-bound program where that what happens, and you ask any person in higher education, and they will tell you that the first 2 years of college are spent in remedial education for what you were supposed to learn in high school. And so what we're able to do is take 16-year-olds as sophomores and say, okay, kids, let's just be serious for a minute. What do you think you want to be? And once they figure out where they're kind of wanting to head, we then at that point have them start CLEPing out of every high school course they take. They take a high school course, they go to the local junior college or college and CLEP out of that same course. And so they're coming out of high school with 2 years college under their belt, and that means less debt. They're more focused on education. We're having a number of kids now get their high school diploma only 10 months after they get their college diploma only 10 months after high school diploma. and that kind of also says something about how poor education has become, that college is now so much a remedial thing of what happens in high school. So AP, that does make a difference, but you can also get the same effects as AP by simply CLEPing. And so, that's a program that's out there that I encourage people to go check out, because there's no use in having to do the same thing again at college and be bored out of your mind and lose your focus. And it can be done in high school, as you can get focused better and get through college a lot faster.
All right, David, not only is it a program that's out there, and folks, I encourage you to go to Wall Builders or just go to pointofview.net and click through to Wall Builders, but it's a radio program. We need to do a program on this because this is important, I think. Parents need to take charge of their kids' education, and there's so many ways they can do this in homeschooling and different things, school choice. But as our kids get older and we look at, college and debt and all of those problems, they're really structural problems for the nation. And I think your answer is one of the big answers, David. So we'll have you back if you'll say yes and talk about that in the very near future.
Would love to do it, and it's fun to cover the stuff, especially the free market solutions that are out there to give us a good education. Okay,
that's David Barton from Wall Builders. David, thank you so much for joining me today, and God bless you.
Thanks, Penna. Thanks for all you do. God bless.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first part of our hour on Common Core, and next up we're going to speak with Sarah Perry from Family Research Council. Family Research Council is actually having a webcast tonight, and she'll talk about that and tell you how to go there this evening and find out more about Common Core. But we're going to give a preview and just talk about some of these problems and what we can do also as parents and citizens to combat that. But this is very important. You remember Goals 2000. You remember School to Work. You remember the Careers Act. All those were programs that provided federal funding for education in exchange for states adhering to a national curriculum. This is just another one. It's got a great name, Common Core, but it's really the same thing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's go now and hear about a special opportunity you have with Point of View.
I have a wonderful opportunity for you today. Your gift to Point of View will have double the impact through our $50,000 Reaching the Next Generation Matching Challenge. Your gift will be matched dollar for dollar up to $50,000. Now, the deadline for the challenge is September 15th, so take a moment right now, do your part, and help us reach this goal. If you're listening to Point of View and have never supported us financially, well, today is a great day to get started. No gift is too small. Every gift is critically important. We ask that you make your best gift and help us in this challenge. Your gift will help people across the nation and around the world learn to apply biblical truth in every area of life. People will learn to develop and defend a biblical worldview, and our culture will shift back toward biblical values. Don't wait. Go right now. Make an online donation at pointofview.net, or you can call us on our toll-free number, 800-347-5151. Now remember, the opportunity expires September 15th, so do not hesitate. Go to pointofview.net, make your online donation, or call us today at 800-347-5151.
Ladies and gentlemen, next up again, as I mentioned, we are going to continue on the theme of education and the Common Core curriculum. It's growing less and less popular, and we'll find out why from an expert, Sarah Perry from Family Research Council. Stay with us for more of that.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about education on today's Point of View, and our thanks to David Barton for sort of laying the groundwork on this Common Core curriculum. Now we're going to speak with Sarah Perry from Family Research Council. And Sarah, she's really the Common Core go-to person there at FRC. She oversees research, education, and publications related to educational reform, and especially the Common Core State Standards Initiative. She's an attorney. She's got her degree from University of Virginia School of Law. She's also the mother of three. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
Hannah, thanks for having me.
Listen, I found something out as I was reading your bio that I didn't realize, but when I read the bio, I read about your book that you co-wrote that I read. It's called When the Fairy Dust Settles, A Mother and Her Daughter Discuss What Really Matters. So that made me realize that your mom is Janet Parshall and your dad is Craig Parshall.
Indeed, they are. Now you can put the pieces together.
Well, you come from great parents. I know them both, and I highly respect them. They are so talented, and they're really national treasures. And so now, here you are at Family Research Council working on this very, very important issue. And Sarah, why did FRC think it was important to actually bring you there and have a point person on Common Core?
Well, this became such a huge issue about 2 or 3 years ago. Now, the Race to the Top was introduced in 2009, and everybody at first blush thought this was a fantastic idea. However, as it's been implemented, and we've realized just exactly the extent of the federal government's involvement, it's become more problematic. So as the states began to adopt it, and most of them adopted in very rapid succession, some of which had to bypass state constitutions in order to push legislation accepting the standards and signing on, and doing so before most of the standards were even released, it really was time for our organization to take a stand, because we obviously value the autonomy of parents. We value the autonomy of the states in drafting their own standards and in their own legislative bodies to make sure that those standards are fully funded and implemented correctly. So the timing really was right to make sure that we had a voice in the market and were able to come in and say, listen, the government's gotten too big, and we're really worried about the future of our children by using what we've discovered are very substandard academics.
Do you have an opinion, Sarah, about why? Because David Barton was telling me just in the last segment about these standards, and when you looked at them and found that similar standards had been rejected in the Soviet Union and in Russia, and even in California, where they threw out whole language a long time ago because it wasn't working. And just some of these crazy things, they never seem to go away. They just continue to pop up. But why would we do this now? Why in an era when we're trying to improve education, at least sane people are, why would you pick this sort of standard and try to force it on the states?
Well, I think this is part and parcel of an administration that's gotten sort of too big for its own shoes. The entire administration has worked diligently to push national programs on us. Again, this is the administration that brought us Obamacare. So large government is very germane to the administrating body right now. I think particularly we have some very interested corporate parties, and this is part of the entanglement of Common Core, is that it isn't just the government's involvement, but it really is a series of educrats who are in the process of funding and designing a program of educational reform and are not in the best position to do so. It is really a gross distortion to say that Bill Gates or ExxonMobil or Pearson Publishing or General Electric or the Chamber of Commerce know better than parents and states do about the best way to educate their children. So I think this is a function of a government that's too big and businesses that are too interested in profiteering.
You know, every time we discuss, Sarah, an educational sort of a new plan that makes a curriculum national and tries to be top down from the Department of Education, we see these dumbed down standards. And, it always makes me scratch my head unless there is sort of an agenda to actually make the population more controllable. But I won't even ask you about that. What I am asking you about, though, is different subjects, math, history. David Barton told us a lot about history and how these standards leave out so much of our history and really portray America as evil more than good. And, what we need to do is really give the whole picture. But what about math? Because we put this piece from the Wall Street Journal a while back on our website today. And it was a math teacher who was appalled by the California math standards. And then you hear about how they take simple math problems and because they absolutely have to use manipulatives in math, make them much more complex. It would be a lot easier to teach the kids to memorize their multiplication tables. So what about this, making subjects harder to learn and so the students actually learn less?
Well, both sort of branches of this initial program, the AP U.S. History course, the APUSH curriculum, again, this is David Coleman's next pet project, as he's just taken over as president of the College Board, which drafts the SATs and also the APUSH curriculum. But that's sort of a separate issue. As concerns math specifically, I read with great interest the article by Marina Ratner, and she is a math professor at UC Berkeley. She knows her stuff. She is a grandmother, and when her grandson came home to do a simple math worksheet, she basically said, this is a joke. This is junk math. What you're doing is you're forcing these students to write pictures and diagrams. You are overly complicating something that should be very basic, and you're frustrating children who are not at a developmental level where they can make the leaps in reasoning that the Common Core requires. So what it does is it takes away a foundation of mathematics that have worked. And regardless of what the pundits will say about our NAEP test scores, we know internationally our assessments are not on par with Finland and Singapore and China. We understand that. That was a huge motivating factor for the push behind Common Core. But mathematics in California were the highest standards in the country. ELA standards in Massachusetts were the highest in the country. Rather than calling it a competition among the states and having them, incentivizing them to draft their own standards, let's compare what works. Let's compare whose test scores are the highest. This was a broad brush nationalized reform, and the mathematics, we know, are not even going to prepare our children for STEM careers. Jason Zimba, the mathematician who wrote the mathematics standards, said, well, if you really want to take calculus in college, you're going to have to take more math than what's in Common Core, because it really is only designed to prepare you for a non-selective college like a junior college or a community college.
Sarah Perry is my guest, and she is with Family Research Council. Sarah, there's no issue more important to parents than education, and they tend to get involved when they find out that it's not going well at their local school district or their kids aren't learning what they should be learning. They get involved. And I have a feeling, a suspicion, that's why FRC is having a program tonight. Can you tell us about it?
Certainly. We have an agenda that we are covering with a number of different topics relative to Common Core. And the title of our program is Common Core, the Government's Classroom. And we've assembled a number of guests who are each going to address a specific asset and an aspect of the Common Core. And Common Core is something that really cannot be simplified other than to say it's bad policy and it's bad academics. That's about as simple as I can make it, but it involves so many intrusive tentacles. It really is sort of this national leviathan that people are stabbing at to try to knock down. And in some states, in the 5 states that have repealed it, we understand the success of the grassroots movement. So this is really an incentive for us, particularly as school starts, particularly as Congress comes back from their month-long vacation, to really energize parents and educators to inform them about the specifics. You can go to frc.org/Common Core. It is a free webinar. It's open to the public. All you have to do simply is register to get in. And some of our guests include Representative Tom Cotton from the 4th District of Arkansas. He'll be talking about congressional movement against the Common Core. There's already a Senate resolution that was sponsored by Senator Lindsey Graham, so they're working on one currently in the House. We have Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. He's going to explain his change of heart on Common Core and why he felt it was necessary after originally saying, what a great idea to have standards, to go, oh, These are not the standards that we want. We also have Dr. Sandra Stopsy from the University of Arkansas. She is also the one who was single-handedly credited with drafting those outstanding Massachusetts standards in ELA and served on the Common Core Validation Committee. Her experience is wonderful in that she can say, I was in there when we discussed them. We had to sign confidentiality agreements. Everything was closed door, and I refused to sign on because I did not think they were good enough for America's children. So we really have some excellent guests coming on tonight, and we're very much looking forward to using it as a platform to help energize parents to be more involved in their students' education.
We're going to discuss this a little bit more after the break with Sarah Perry. We're talking about your child's education. Let's open up the phones, too, in case you have any questions. 800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We're in a very interesting discussion about education in the United States of America. I'm Penna Dexter. My guest is Sarah Perry, and she is Family Research Council's Common Core Coalition Manager. Sarah, this does take a coalition. It's so important, all-encompassing, and the tentacles go everywhere, as you said. And, of course, it was certainly sold as a states' rights type of program where every state would implement it and you had the right to take it or not. The state I live in, Texas, actually didn't. But most states did, and many states are now sorry. Some governors are sorry, as you mentioned, Bobby Jindal. But and there were some conservative leaders out there who were supporting this. And you can, if you just take the name Common Core, it's a conservative sounding name in a sense because we want to see a core curriculum and a core body of knowledge. But it's who decides what that body of knowledge is. It's the problem, isn't it?
Right, absolutely. And when you hear about the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State Officers, it sounds very appropriate. It sounds very state-led. It sounds very voluntary. Both of those organizations are trade organizations. They are no different than, for example, a Chamber of Commerce or an ExxonMobil. They are just simply related to the business of what those individuals do. They have nothing to do with any legislative authority. So the fact that they were involved and offered this on a silver platter to the states is not a compelling argument for the fact that this is a voluntary adoption. And when you hold the sword over their head of federal funding to the tune of $4.3 billion when you're in a flagging economy, or a waiver from the really onerous regulations of No Child Left Behind, there wasn't going to be a state at all who didn't jump on that. So I am not surprised in the least that 45 states and the District of Columbia initially signed on. But again, they signed on before the official draft was released 6 months after the contracts were due. So there really was a lot of lack of transparency in the entire process. The confidentiality agreements that had to be signed in the validation meetings and during the drafting, these were not open meetings. They were not open for public discourse. It was not a standard school board town hall type meeting. And the secrecy around it just, to me, evinces the fact that this really had nothing to do with making students better. There is a profit motive here. There is an ideology behind it. And that's really what we're trying to stop.
And this is really what rubs parents the wrong way, because if education is so important to parents, it's an area in which communities actually should be much more involved, because they're more aware of the type of student that is in the area, the type of industry that's there, all of that. Parents tend to come together over education to try to influence policy. But when you have something coming down from the federal government that, it's got monetary strings attached, then you pit school districts against parents, don't you?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, money, again, is such a big consideration because the Pioneer Institute and the American Principles Project have done extensive research on this. I have worked with both organizations, and they anticipate that over the timeline, the 7-year extensive timeline, start to finish, of implementation, it will cost approximately $15 billion. So that sends your $4.3 billion pot of money right out the window. Now you have to inform teachers, educate teachers, purchase assessment equipment because it's all going to be computerized. You have to train the students. This is lost classroom time. And the assessments themselves, that's not even something we've touched on, but the school boards, the states, had to sign on not only to the Common Core standards, but the second part of the contract required the consortium, PARC and SBAC, to also be accepted by the state. So it was, you're involved in a government consortium and you accept the government standards. This really was, it's a two-pronged punch, really, to the states, and it presented a very difficult dilemma when so many of the states have been for so long struggling to find sufficient education dollars. I know one of the teachers in our school district in northern Maryland, we live in a very nice, quiet, rural area, and we have, as a general rule, very good schools, 4 stars out of 5. She has been teaching for 12 years and hasn't had a pay raise in 5. So the teachers are already underfunded, the school districts are already underfunded, and now you're going to have them bear the cost of implementing a very expensive federal experiment, and that's really what it is.
Let's take a call from the state of Maine. Laura, listening in on WBCI. Laura, thanks for calling in. You're on Point of View.
Thank you for taking my call. Yes, I'm a paraeducator in the state of Maine, and we're just fully implementing the Common Core standards in our district this year. So I'm just beginning to see what it's all about, really. And it's just really going to change education drastically. And I'll take your comments off the air.
Well, first of all, just tell me drastically in what direction.
Oh, not for the better.
Yeah, can you give me one reason you think so?
Well, it's adding a lot of assessing and taking away time from other things that teachers would have traditionally done in the classroom. So that assessing time is just going to become much greater.
Sarah, does this surprise you?
No, not the least. That's also what we've been hearing, is that the assessments of these dear teachers who are the boots on the ground, and we have 3 small children in public school and adore our teachers. They are on an email basis with us, a phone call basis with us. These are children under the tutelage and instruction for a very precious amount of time of these teachers. I really do believe they are a national treasure. But now we have assessments, the performance of these teachers, that is going to be tied into test scores, testing that takes place now for sometimes twice and 3 times as long as it did without the Common Core, just under regular state assessments. And as a parenthetical aside, when you have kids who are all going to be tested the same way for multiple days at a time, you take away not only classroom instruction, but an opportunity to instruct them individually. If a child is a bad test taker, if he hasn't had breakfast that day, if he comes from a home in which there's a divorce occurring, if he is like my son on the autism spectrum, who doesn't do well in standardized tests that don't take into account his developmental disability, you're not going to get an accurate reading anyway. So you can spend all the money you want on assessments and computerized equipment, and you're still not going to understand how these students are performing because they're not being taught how to perform.
Sarah, I'm so grateful that you are doing this event tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, you can go to frc.org/Common Core. Is that right, Sarah?
That's correct. Yep.
What time?
It is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, you all can switch to your time zone and tune into that. I think you'll learn a lot. We will do some more programs on this. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Penna. Take care.
That's Sarah Perry from Family Research Council. You heard a little bit earlier about our matching challenge here at Point of View. Just to listen to this to find out more about what's going on here.
God greatly used Point of View to reach the last generation with biblical truth, and now He's reaching a new generation through radio and internet technology. The Point of View podcast now has 30,000 downloads each month, 1,000 a day, and the live audio stream has 11,000 streams a month, a third of those from nations around the globe. Now, even though it's still very new, the video live cast of Point of View already has almost 3,000 views in just the last month. And soon you're going to see even more ways that Point of View is using the internet to reach the next generation of listeners and viewers. Exciting things are happening at Point of View, but there is still much that needs to be done. Now, to reach the millennial generation, we have to expand our online presence even further. Please partner with Point of View today. Through your financial support, help restore Christ in our culture. Your gift today will be matched dollar for dollar through our $50,000 Reaching the Next Generation Matching Challenge. Please take a moment right now. Give your online gift at pointofview.net or call us on our toll-free line 800-347-5151. This opportunity expires September 15th. That's coming right up, so do not hesitate. Go to pointofview.net, make your online donation, or call us today at 800-347-5151.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30. Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221, or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen, for the second hour of Point of View. If you have questions or comments about Common Core and the national push toward national standards and curriculum in the United States of America, we will continue to discuss that in the final half hour by taking your calls at 800-351-1212. But for the next couple of segments, we have another very important subject to discuss, and it was brought up in the Wall Street Journal in yesterday's edition, in an op-ed by Theodore Olson, who's former U.S. Solicitor General and attorney. And he says that 46 Senate Democrats have concluded that the First Amendment is an impediment to re-election that a little tinkering can cure. They're proposing a constitutional amendment that would give Congress and state legislatures the authority to regulate the degree to which citizens can devote their resources to advocating the election and defeat of candidates. Voters, whatever their political views, should rise up against politicians who want to dilute the Bill of Rights to perpetuate the tenure in office. It's not a new tactic, but it's been perpetrated big time during this administration in various ways. And with us to talk about it is Cornell University Law Professor William Jacobson. He's also the author of the Legal Insurrection blog. William, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on.
We're very concerned about this effort in the Senate. Of course, Harry Reid leading it, Democrats signing on to try to really gut the First Amendment, correct?
That's pretty much right. You summed it up in a sentence. It's really, if somebody had told me this might happen, I would have, been in disbelief. Now, the reality is the First Amendment is not going to be changed. This is mostly an empty vote. It's not even going to pass the Senate because they need a supermajority. But the mere fact that they're trying and that they're going to apparently, I don't know if the vote's taken place, it's going to take place soon, going to get virtually all Democrats in the Senate to go along with it is a pretty shocking thing.
It is shocking. And, you know that the Democrats and the Obama administration have been upset by certain Supreme Court decisions recently that have actually opened up freedom of political speech and the ability to influence elections by giving money, which is a legitimate way to really exercise your citizenship in this country. But they've been upset that some of that has been opened up, and this is one of those tactics to close it back down, isn't it?
That's right. This is the Citizens United decision, and another decision which stripped away some of the restrictions, not all of them, but some of the restrictions that had been placed on the ability of corporations to spend money with regard to political issues. I don't think they stripped away limits on donations to candidates, but in terms of having your voice, running ads, telling people what you think on an issue and why it's important to you, that those impediments were more or less lifted, as contrary to the First Amendment, that we have freedom of speech and people can come together and can form associations such as corporations, and through those corporations people can act collectively to get their voices known. So at one level, should have been a completely non-controversial decision. That logically, well, of course, if I can speak and I can spend my money, why can't I join with other people to do the same thing? And that's been taking place in American politics almost forever. Certainly unions do it. And so, but the Democrats don't like that decision. They feel, I think, I'm not sure if they actually believe what they say or they are just saying it, but they say that will somehow undermine the democracy, that only the wealthiest voices will get heard, et cetera, et cetera. But that's our society. Our society is that people can spend their money the way they want to spend their money, and as long as it's not something that's illegal, if it's a constitutionally protected right that they have, they can do that. And you know what? Democratic billionaires can spend their money just as freely as conservative or Republican billionaires can, and people can form different groups and unions and et cetera. But for some reason, the Democrats have made that into a huge talking point, and now the leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, the majority leader, has made it his goal to put this to a vote. I guess he thinks it's going to help them politically, since it's not going to pass. They're not going to get the two-thirds they need. It's not going to be passed by the required number of states. I mean, there is not going to be a constitutional amendment. But the question is, why do they want it? And that's what's so troubling. It's that the desire to preserve their power at the expense of altering, the Constitution, and a part of the Constitution that has been in place almost since our founding, or at least since we passed the Constitution. It's really baffling.
This is SJ Resolution 19. It was introduced by Senator Tom Udall, New Mexico. And, I wonder the same thing, William, and that is why would they do this? I know that, if it passed, they would have, if they expected it to pass, they would certainly have vested interest because it protects incumbents. But it won't pass, and so the only thing I can say is it's just part of this this attempt to sort of portray conservatives as evil and the enemy, and they get to talk about that and stir up emotion, I guess, on the left. What do you think?
I guess I think one of the funnier things that we do at the website is we collect bumper stickers. Readers will take photos of bumper stickers and send them to us, and we post them on the website, political bumper stickers. And we've been doing that for years, and we've got hundreds of them. And, there are bumper stickers out there about Citizens United that people put on their cars. I mean, they have made this into some sort of demon decision that they rally the base on. And I guess they figure in a midterm election, when the presidential candidate is not at the top of the ticket, they need something to rally the base. And I don't think this is going to do it, but they must think it will. And I think this is a get-out-the-vote scheme to try to get their base excited that, look, we tried. The only way you can change Washington and change this horrible Supreme Court decision is to get out and vote. That's really the only thing I can see, because it's not going to pass. I mean, that's the good news. It's not going to pass.
This is the Supreme Court decision that President Obama publicly chastised the Supreme Court justices at one State of the Union address for coming to. So they do continue to keep that up. After the break, I'm going to ask you a few questions about other things. Perhaps this one is not going to fly. It's not going to pass, but it's one of those attempts to silence conservative speech. And you've written about other attempts that have worked to some degree, like, for instance, the IRS ways of denying 501c3 nonprofit status to certain organizations. That certainly has worked, and it actually influenced an election. So we'll talk about that after the break. But I do want to send people to pointofview.net, because there, under web links, you can link to Legal Insurrection. It sounds like a great, informative, and fun website to check out. And that's our guest, William Jacobson's website. So we'll send you there. And also at pointofview.net, you can see the articles. There's an article by William Jacobson, A Campaign to Silence Conservative Speech, so you can read more about this. Our articles about Common Core that were mentioned earlier in the program are also up there. Our donate button is there. And as we've been mentioning today, we have a matching grant available that will help really double your gift. And this is a good time for it. It's summer, so we would appreciate that. So stay with us. We've got a lot more here on Point of View.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
It may begin with teasing or even insults, but it doesn't stop there. Bullying has become a major issue for parents, teachers, and schools to address. More than 1 in 5 school children report being bullied on a regular basis. Bullying doesn't stop when students graduate. Bosses and spouses bully others. There is really only one way to stop the bullying syndrome: intervention. June Hunt explains what this is and how to stop it in her newest book, Bullying, Bully No More. On my program and in her book, she explained the important differences between common conflict and bullying. She also reminds us that nearly all bullies are bullied themselves. That starts a progression that parents and teachers need to observe and interrupt. She also talks about the important role a bystander can have in stopping a bully. Usually there's a bully, a victim, and a number of bystanders. Those who stand by and watch it happen usually are encouraging bullies to do even more. Bullies usually believe their behavior is justified. They even feel entitled. They think it is okay to say mean things. After all, someone did it to them. They have to be the center of attention, and that is why bystanders need to intervene and stop providing the bully with a ready audience. June Hunt also takes on 10 of the most popular fallacies of bullying. Some believe that bullying is normal and merely a rite of passage. Others believe that bullying is a rare occurrence. Even others believe that bullies will mature and grow out of bullying behavior. All of these ideas and many others discussed in the book are false. The Bible reminds bullies that God opposes the proud. Bystanders should remember that Proverbs says that we should rescue those being led away to death. I applaud June Hunt for writing a book that pastors, parents, and teachers need. Bullying is a real problem, and her book provides a biblical perspective and practical answers. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. My guest is William Jacobson. He's a Cornell University Law Professor. He's got a blog, the Legal Insurrection blog, and we're talking about this brazen attempt by Harry Reid in the U.S. Senate to pass an amendment to the Constitution that really guts the First Amendment in one sense. And it would limit spending on almost any speech and activity that might influence elections. And it gives the government, really the Congress and the states, the power to regulate this, setting reasonable limits, it says, on the raising and spending of money by candidates and others to influence elections. So it's a clampdown, really an effort to silence conservative speech. And William, as we talk about these attempts, which is not just this, which won't pass, but others that have affected us, talk about the IRS attempts, which were successful in many cases because they went uncovered for many years, didn't they?
That's right. I mean, this has been something that's been pursued for a while.
And of course, even now, I'm seeing an article, 5 more IRS employee emails lost. So they're getting away with not even providing the information that proves that they've been targeting conservatives. And so, I mean, that's just, probably number one and the most apparent to Americans is that, but there are others, aren't there?
Yeah, well, the IRS thing we've been talking about for a while, and the attempt to just gain the information and the knowledge of what happened there. Congressional committee's been looking into it. The IRS can't find things, then they can find things, then things are lost, then hard drives are lost, and then they're wiped clean. What it really gets down to is that the IRS had a program which has now been admitted. I mean, it's been found by the Treasury Inspector General that targeted Tea Party and conservative groups. And that really is quite a chilling thing when the IRS gets involved in politics. And that, I think many people feel, essentially froze out a significant part of the conservative movement for the 2012 electoral cycle, because there were a lot of new groups who wanted to be heard and wanted to get involved were waiting for their approvals, and their approvals that never came. And they didn't know at the time why they never came, but now we know why, that it was a political consideration. And, of course, as you indicate, that's not the only place it's been taking place. I mean, we've got a very politicized investigation of Governor Scott Walker in Wisconsin. In fact, today there was a report, I'm just reading it a few minutes ago, that a former prosecutor has come forward, somebody who used to work with the district attorney investigating Walker, and has said that what motivated that whole investigation is that the district attorney's wife is a school employee and was upset with Walker's collective bargaining reforms.
Wow.
And if that turns out to be true, then that is absolutely shocking, because they have been after Scott Walker for years. Your listeners may or may not have heard of the so-called John Doe proceedings.
Sure.
John Doe proceedings are they're, I think, unique to Wisconsin. They've been around for a century, but only lately really have been in controversy. It's essentially secret investigations that a district attorney can commence, has to get a judge's approval, but can commence these secret investigations that are so secret that if you're subpoenaed, if they subpoena your records, if they raid your house, if they take your computer under this investigation, you're not even allowed to tell anybody that it happened. I mean, that's how chilling it is. And so they did that to Scott Walker once regarding his time as county executive, and it didn't work. They found some low-level employees who sent some political emails, nothing tainting Scott Walker. Then they started it again. And they started again in connection with the recall election, claiming that conservative groups were improperly coordinating with Walker. And they did that, and it's that district attorney's wife who supposedly is the motivating force behind it. And they seized records from, I think it was 35 conservative activists. They literally raided homes early in the morning and pulled people out while they grabbed their files and their computers. They intercepted or got a hold of somehow text messages, bank records, a whole range of things, until finally two things happened. One, a new state court judge was appointed and said, hold on a second, I am not issuing any more subpoenas, because the entire theory behind this investigation, which is that they illegally coordinated, even if they did it, would not be illegal. And then some of the targets, people who'd had their files seized and their homes raided, sued in federal court. And a federal court judge also ruled the same way, said that even if what you're saying happened, it's not illegal. It's free speech. They're allowed to coordinate on issues, and issued an injunction stopping the proceeding from going forward. And that's what's actually being argued in federal court today, because the prosecutors are seeking to have that lawsuit dismissed and the injunction dismissed as well. But this is the whole thing, that this is the government, IRS, now Scott Walker, and we've seen what happened to Governor Perry down in Texas, which we can talk about. Again, very questionable sort of motivations there, but the use of government power to try to suppress conservative speech, which is exactly what would happen if the Democrats in the Senate got their way.
If you'd like to join our conversation, the number is 800-351-1212, and my guest is William Jacobson. And, you know, this part of the tactics, William, of taking a successful conservative leader, attempting to find something they've done wrong, some sort of a crime, and then going after them. And you, as you said, we've seen it with Scott Walker. We're seeing them try to do this with Rick Perry, and so we shouldn't be surprised by these tactics. This is their modus operandi, isn't it?
That's right, and we're seeing that more. It's very interesting how one by one Democratic prosecutors are going after potential Republican nominees for 2016. Mm-hmm. Rick Perry. Now, I'm not saying he'd be the nominee. I don't know how successful he'd be this time around. Scott Walker, federal prosecutors are investigating Chris Christie, whether you like him or not. He's a potential candidate. And, you know, the law enforcement reaction and investigations regarding that so-called Bridgegate, where the bridge was closed for a day or two or something like that, you know, it just seemed disproportionate at the time. You know, it should be investigated. There's no question. If somebody did something wrong, then they should be held accountable. But it was like a swarming effect against Chris Christie from various law enforcement and political people. And so one by one, they're going after our potential presidential candidates. Now, they might argue, well, if they did something wrong, they should be investigated, and that's fine. It just, at a certain point, you say this can't be coincidence. This does become a mode of operation. It's not simply, random acts happening at the same time. And I think that that's what you see. And when it comes to Scott Walker and Chris Christie and Rick Perry, they don't really care if there's a conviction, because now they've all been tainted with potential criminality, and that's what is politically damaging.
Yeah, whether that's true or not, it's now out there, and the damage has been done. Thank you so much, William, for joining me today to talk about these. Of course, we'll find out probably later today how that went down in the Senate. But, ladies and gentlemen, you can go to pointofview.net and you can check out Legal Insurrection. Also find the article on this particular subject that we've been discussing today with Mr. Jacobson. And thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you'll come back and join us as these things play out, because we know there'll be more.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
All right. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment, I'm going to let you hear another message about our opportunities here at Point of View. We are accomplishing so much, and we do it on a pretty low budget. And so we kind of want to give you a little bit more information on that. And then after that, we're going to be taking your calls at 800-351-1212. And we're going to talk about ISIS and whether George W. Bush, whether it's sort of part of the fulfillment of some of the things that he predicted that might happen if President Obama did what he said he was going to do in Iraq. So we'll talk about that also after the break. And also, why should more Americans be like Kate Middleton? Good question. Heard some kind of interesting news about her yesterday. But right now, let's listen to this message about Point of View.
God is doing some exciting things at Point of View. In just the next few weeks, Point of View will launch a new online video series aimed at reaching the millennial generation. You're also going to see the launch of our new website, our election microsite, providing resources for the November election. We've got the recently launched video Livecast, growing very rapidly, thousands of views every month. Using internet technology, Point of View is reaching a wider audience than ever before, but there is still much that needs to be done. Tremendous opportunities to expand the reach of the ministry and touch even more lives with biblical truth. Your financial support for Point of View impacts the lives of people across this nation and literally around the world. And today, your gift will have double the impact. That's right, double, through our $50,000 Reaching the Next Generation Matching Challenge. Your gift today to help restore Christ in our culture will be doubled, dollar for dollar, up to $50,000. So please, take a moment right now, go online and make your gift at pointofview.net, or call us on our toll-free line, 800-347-5151. This opportunity expires September 15th. That's coming right up, so please don't hesitate. Go to pointofview.net, make your online donation, or call us today, 800-347-5151.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. We are taking your calls at 800-351-1212. One of the subjects that we would like to talk about here in the last couple of segments of the program is Common Core, which we spent the first hour on. And I mentioned during that time an article that we posted at our website, pointofview.net, called, it's out of the Wall Street Journal, it was an opinion. Back in August, Marina Ratner wrote it. It's called Making Math Education Even Worse. And she actually is a professor emeritus of mathematics at University of California at Berkeley. And she was awarded the International Ostrowski Prize in 1993 and received the John J. Carty Award from the National Academy of Sciences, of which she's been a member. And so she knows what she's talking about when it comes to math instruction. She was looking at her grandchild's math under the Common Core program, and she was appalled, making math much harder, forcing a lot of illustration and manipulatives into math, which can be helpful, but not for every single problem, making it much slower to learn. And she said, if quoting her, as a result, the Common Core standards were several years behind the old standards, especially in higher grades. It became clear that the new standards represent lower expectations and that students taught in the way that these standards require would have little chance of being admitted to even the average college and would certainly struggle if they did get in. And later she says the requirement of visual models and creating stories is all over Common Core. The students were constantly told to draw models to answer trivial questions, such as finding 20% of 80, or finding the time for a car to drive 10 miles if it drives 4 miles in 10 minutes. Lots of kids can do these problems in their head, and so it slows them down to have to draw a pie chart or whatever. A student who gives a correct answer right away, she says, as one should, and doesn't draw anything loses points. This model drawing mania went on in my grandson's class for the entire year, leaving no time to cover geometry and other important topics. And this is what I found out because there was sort of another iteration of Common Core that took place, several of them. There was Goals 2000, there was School to Work, there was No Child Left Behind. And we had something that came in I think around 2000, 1999, 2000. It was called Connected Math, and it was the same thing. It was discovering math for yourself. It wasn't teaching math. And I think this is, so this came into our school district, and suddenly there's much fewer kids going on to algebra in the 8th grade, even in the 9th grade. And so then you end up at the end not getting calculus, perhaps not even getting trigonometry. So just in math, it's a problem, dumbing down. Lots of other problems. And we'd love to hear any of the things that you've objected to, that you've run into, if you've been exposed to Common Core. Again, the number is 800-351-1212. For a second, also, let's turn our eyes to Great Britain, to the royal family, just for a minute. This is a piece of news that we got yesterday, of course. Kate Middleton is known for setting trends with her outfit selections. This comes out of the Daily Signal from Heritage Foundation. But they go on to say she's really bucking the current societal patterns with her announcement, which took place yesterday. And that is, she and Prince William are expecting their second child. Of course, in the U.S. today, the average birth rate per woman is 1.9. 0.9 child, that's a little problematical, but of course it's an average. So the average is not 2 children per woman, it's 1.9. So Kate Middleton's already beat that, or she will be. When her child is born. And the Heritage Foundation's 2014 Index of Culture and Opportunity has reported this. They're saying the rate is roughly the same in the United Kingdom. So they're also 1.9 per child, per family, or per woman, according to the World Bank. So Kate Middleton is setting a good example by having her second baby. Western countries, says Heritage, face a slew of economic consequences because of declining birth rates. Some of them are shrinking workforces, which affect economic prosperity. Also, the eventual large population of the elderly, which will certainly expect government programs to provide the assistance that we've all been promised, despite the fact that the pool of taxpayers isn't going to be what it was. You're going to have more elderly supported by fewer workers. Plenty of Americans certainly would like to have more children, and I know that's true, but economics becomes a consideration in many families. A 2013 Gallup poll found that Americans wanted an average of 2.6 children. Wow, that's another interesting number. But really, they want more children, really higher than what is the reality here. According to this poll, the top reason cited for not having more children was a concern about the cost. 65% of those polled mentioned the cost as a reason not to have more children. Of course, it says heritage, let's face it. Being British royalty has its problems, but lack of cash flow isn't one of them. So that's not going to be factoring into the decision of Kate Middleton and Prince William. Let's hope they have even more children. Only 6% of this survey that was taken, again, the survey was a 2013 Gallup poll, attributed fewer children to personal choice or no desire for children. But there's also the fact that an increasing number of children grow up without brothers and sisters, and it's normally considered healthy to have siblings. A little bit more fun for kids also. And the writer of this particular article at Heritage, I think it's Genevieve Wood, she says, as someone who grew up with 4 brothers and sisters, I definitely had my moments of fantasizing about the life of an only child, particularly when a sibling just wouldn't stop bothering me. But most of the time, it's good to have siblings. You needn't be royalty to have the luxury of a second child or third or fourth. And let's hope, says Heritage, that Kate Middleton's ability to set trends includes family size as well as fashion. Nice little piece coming out of the Heritage Foundation, and congratulations to Prince William and Kate Middleton. Let's take calls here at Point of View. We've got one coming in from Arkansas about Common Core. This is Michelle. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for calling in.
Hi. My son is in the GT program. I just wanted to make a comment about he's been introduced to the Common Core in math, and most of the time, every time he has to do his homework, he has a lot of complaints about how he has to do Common Core. He doesn't like having to always have to draw out the picture, as well as they have these weird ways of writing out the answer. Instead of just writing the answer, he has to put it in Word format as well as an extension format.
What grade is he in?
He is in 4th grade.
So was he doing math okay before Common Core came along?
Oh, yes. He always had straight A's in math. He was very brilliant at it. But the way they have math now is like he's not able to grasp everything completely. He's like, I know the answer, but I don't know what they're wanting from me because of the way they explain Common Core.
That's so interesting. It's kind of a roundabout way, as from what I understand, as getting to the answers in a more roundabout way. And, you know, is your son good at just like memorizing tables and things like that?
Oh, yes. He has like the mathematical table memorized from 1 through 12.
So, and it sounds to me like that's not all that important here. Or it becomes less important under Common Core. Have you seen that?
Yes. He's like, you know, all the stuff I've learned previously, now that they've introduced this, just doesn't seem as important as it once was.
Interesting. You know, almost in math, I don't know, enough about it to know for sure, but it almost sounds like you could use Common Core as a remedial for kids that couldn't make it the other way. But why take kids who are good at math and then draw out the problem-solving process?
I don't know. He doesn't understand it, and he's like, I just want to be able to write the answer as I know what it is instead of having to do all this other stuff, and then he loses points in class if he doesn't.
So have you seen a report card since this started? Probably not. It's just the beginning of the year, huh?
No, I haven't, but he says he's able to get everything, but if he doesn't draw everything out, then he loses points. He doesn't get a full 100 like he used to.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. And, Michelle, thank you. It really makes our point, and that is that states need to look at this, and they need to look at their students and decide what kind of program is going to teach their kids better. It may not be some of this top-down, crazy type of math or whatever. So thanks for calling in. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good one.
You too. Ladies and gentlemen, it's lunacy, and I'm really sick and tired of it. And, I just have been around long enough and watched these educational programs continue to come at us, and they never make the situation better. We aren't seeing raising test scores. We're not seeing our students doing better on international comparisons, we're seeing them do worse. And, if anybody needs to learn anything, I think it's our educational bureaucrats who are making these decisions. I think there's an agenda behind it that is not committed to really improving the education of our kids. It's something else. There's something about indoctrinating them, teaching them different values, and teaching them about a different America that really didn't exist in history, but what they would like to see existing. The sad part of it is to take a subject like math that is really non-ideological and to ruin it and to dumb it down is another very, very disturbing thing that could affect our nation and its development. And we need to continue to discuss this. So stay with us for more of Point of View.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Taking your calls here at Point of View. Most people want to talk about Common Core. Let's go now to the state of Georgia. Kurt is listening in on WLPE. Hi, Kurt. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Penna, this is Kurt calling from Augusta, Georgia. And I was calling in response to talk about this Common Core.
Sure.
I see is that, when they start talking about rearranging history and the rest of that stuff, math is bad enough, but the history issue of, the leaders of the history of the Constitution and all, and if you try to talk about that and not to understand it, how will they recognize tyranny when they see it happening? Which it is happening when you're trying to control us.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. And really, I made the comment a couple of times during the two interviews with Sarah Perry and David Barton that it's more about controlling the population than it is about educating the population and getting an educated populace. It's more about getting a malleable populace. And I think you're right that if people don't understand how tyrannies developed, how they oppressed their citizens, how they even murdered citizens, time after time in history, if you don't learn from history, then you're destined to repeat it, aren't you?
Sure are. I taught military history for about 20 years with the Army. And
did you?
And so, the issue is that we understand this. It's our memory bank, for heaven's sakes.
I think in state after state, whether your state, if your state has adopted this Common Core, it can be unadopted because we're finding that's happening in places like Louisiana. Indiana, Mike Pence has turned around against it, and other states. You can pressure your leaders in your state about this. Now that we're seeing it, it's in the classrooms. It's opening people's eyes. And so I think people like you, Kurt, would be great to speak out in those types of efforts.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll be speaking out when I get a chance.
That's great. That's what Point of View is all about. Thanks, Kurt, for your call. We appreciate it.
All right.
Let's go now to the state of Illinois and speak with Jamie. Hi, Jamie. You are on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, I just had a comment in regard to your comment about it would be good for remedial students.
Yeah, what do you think?
I don't think so because it was so. My grandson's in third grade, and the way they explain certain problems, I couldn't even understand it. And they use terms that I'm like, how would a child even begin to understand the terms they're using, let alone this roundabout way of getting to the point? It was not good.
So their explanations are not understandable?
No, not at all. And it's a very long, to me, it's a drawn-out process. It makes no sense. They're taking something that is simple and making it complicated, and it's very confusing.
So what are they doing in third grade? Is it fractions or multiplication? What is it?
They started out the year with taking large amounts of objects, dividing them into groups as a show of multiplication. Then they jumped from there. They didn't spend hardly any time on that. Then they jumped from there into a day or two of division, and now they've jumped back into this drawing pictures out of adding. It's all over the place. It's confusing. My daughter, they moved into a certain school district because it was supposed to be a good one. They built a new house. And this year, when she found out more about Common Core, and she talked to principals, teachers, superintendents, and the principal could not answer most of her questions. The poor teacher she felt so bad for that has a passion for teaching young children absolutely hates it now because his hands are tied. It's almost all scripted for him. And so they have elected to put their kids in a private school that is not going with Common Core.
Wow, that's so interesting. I wonder how many teachers are going to be subversive and use the old math book.
I don't know. To me, it's a sad day in America that creative teachers that love the kids, love teaching, and they're very creative, their hands are tied. And
yeah. Hey, listen, this is a country where we complain that not enough girls, for instance, are going into engineering, that we don't have enough people that are technically savvy to fill the jobs that are out there. And, instead of bringing up kids that are better in math, we're actually dumbing down math.
Right, I agree. Last year, my second grade grandson had a book to read. It was about President Obama. And in it, to me, were undercurrents of all the social agenda. And then this year, he had a test on turtles and the Star-Spangled Banner. And one of the questions between turtles' questions and the Star-Spangled Banner was, do you think the government should pass a law saying that children have to do chores? And I'm like, why is this question here? And I talked to him about it. I said, what did you say? He said, well, yes, Grandma, because that's a good thing. And I said, you don't think that the parents should be the one that say whether or not you have to do a chore or not? Do you really want the government to tell you? And after we talked it through, he says, well, no, that'd be dumb.
Yeah.
So to me, these subtle things that are just being thrown in, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, and that's part of the complaint from those who are now looking at Common Core is the parental rights issue. And this has always been the complaint about federal control of education. We know better than parents know how to raise your children, so they veer off of the academic subject matter into other areas. So that's just another concern of all this. And, parents, ladies and gentlemen, if you're concerned about this, as you should be, you should do exactly what Jamie and all these other parents and people that have called in. You ought to observe what's going on in your schools and be very intimately involved. If you don't take your children out, you need to be involved in their assignments and what they're doing. And then, of course, there are other alternatives, which we'll discuss on other programs: homeschooling, school choice, private schools. There are a lot of other ways. But, if your kids are in public school, I think they can still get a good education, but you may have to supplement it. I know that the years that my children were in public school, I made them do math drills every single day. They hated it, but they're good in math, and some of them have jobs that take high-level math skills. It wasn't using pie charts and manipulatives. It was drill. It was memorization and just doing it over and over again. I'm sorry, it's not always fun, but it's important and necessary. We'll continue. Thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate your weighing in on this.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
They're also deleting cursive writing, and when my daughter talked to the teacher, she said, now, if they can't write cursive, can they read cursive? And it's most likely they can't read cursive. Yeah. All of our founding documents were written in cursive.
Very interesting. Something else I learned about cursive writing is that the actual act of cursive writing helps your brain. And so to take that away is another great loss. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take one more call before we have to go. I'm so sorry, where the phones are just lighting up. But I want to point you to Point of View website to also see an article that I put up there. George W. Bush was right about the Iraq pullout. It's Mark Thiessen from the Washington Post. It's really good. Maybe Kirby will let us talk about it on Friday. I will ask him. He will be back here in the studio tomorrow. But as a matter of fact, I don't even know if I can take one more call. I don't think I have time. Steve, just give me your comment. This is Steve in Missouri. Give me your comment really quick, just a few seconds.
Okay. Hey, I just wanted to mention that I know some teachers at church, and when I've mentioned problems with Common Core to them, they just seem to stiffen up and not want to hear it and be real against it, even though they're good people and taking care of stuff in their own class.
Yeah. Here's what we're dealing with, and we really need to continue talking about this subject. But let's hear now. Let me say goodbye, and thank you so much for listening, and let's hear more about Point of View.
I have a wonderful opportunity for you today. Your gift to Point of View will have double the impact through our $50,000 Reaching the Next Generation Matching Challenge. Your gift will be matched dollar for dollar up to $50,000. Now, the deadline for the challenge is September 15th, so take a moment right now, do your part, and help us reach this goal. If you're listening to Point of View and have never supported us financially, well, today is a great day to get started. No gift is too small. Every gift is critically important. We ask that you make your best gift and help us in this challenge. Your gift will help people across the nation and around the world learn to apply biblical truth in every area of life. People will learn to develop and defend a biblical worldview, and our culture will shift back toward biblical values. Don't wait. Go right now. Make an online donation at pointofview.net, or you can call us on our toll-free number, 800-347-5151. Now remember, the opportunity expires September 15th, so do not hesitate. Go to pointofview.net, make your online donation, or call us today at 800-347-5151.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.